Good morning, I'm Martina.
Good morning, I'm Irene. I'm going to share the screen.
Okay, our essay talks about the phenomenon of gentrification. In particular, the effect of gentrification on two neighborhoods of Turin, Quadrilatero Romano and San Salvario. The theoretical term was born to indicate a phenomenon which includes places inhabited by working class, so the poorer economic class, that at some point interested bourgeois class. The richest class, in fact, adopt a process of verticalization in the area in terms of economic, social, and cultural futures. Today, gentrification has a more difficult meaning. In fact, it refers to a multiplicity of phenomena that have in common the social substitution in an urban area, both with positive but also with negative results. Today, many neighbors in many metropolitan areas have been affected by this process. In Paris, for example, in Turin, in Milan, in London, and also in Rome, when we talk about the Europe, but also in America, for example, New York and also Chicago. In these cities, there was a substitution of the working class with the middle class. Regarding the born of the term, it is important to nominate the German sociologist Urs Glass. She, in 1964, coined the term, studying social transformation in London. In one of her texts, in fact, described the phenomenon of urban substitution of the working class with the middle class. She said that when it starts, it is irreversible. Another important author was Smith, a Scottish geographer and sociologist. Smith began by changing the notion of gentrification. He talked about gentrification in more economic terms. In fact, he said that gentrification is a product resulting from the functioning of land and the real estate market.
According to two scholars, Awkward and Smith, there are three phases of gentrification from 1968 to 2000. To these three phases, a third phase was added, which corresponds to the period between 2000 and 2006. The first phase coincides with the processes of the industrialization and suburbanization. Gentrification affected some cities of North America and the large centers of Western Europe, but it was still not widespread. The second phase began at the end of the 70s and lasted for 10 years. This phenomenon started to be more common at the international scale and to be spread also in smaller cities. And with the spread of gentrification, movements opposed to this type of phenomenon also began to emerge. After a period of slowdown of the phenomenon in the early 90s, the demolition of buildings started to be preferred to make space for the construction of new ones. In the first phase, after the 2000, property prices soared up to the crisis of the 2009. The concept of gentrification did not find precise outlines in Italy, and the phenomenon is not referred by many scholars. Generally, the gentrification in Italy differ from the American one also because no class conflict or forced displacement of inhabitants are usually registered. We begin to speak in Italy of gentrification only at the beginning of the 21st century. Our case study is about the comparison between the area of San Salvario and the one of the Quadrilatero in the city of Turin. And so, in order to understand which is the context in which the gentrification took place, I'm going to explain a little bit about the history of Turin and the one of the neighborhoods. Turin had a period of splendor with the arrival of the industries, especially thanks to the Fiat automobile pole, but recently it has tried to become an economic pole of culture and knowledge. For example, a great opportunity was given by the Olympic Winter Games in 2006. This changed the sociological dynamics of the city. For what concerns San Salvario and Quadrilatero Romano, both areas have been affected by gentrification processes in two different periods, and the social and territorial transformations are still visible today. In fact, in both cases, it's not possible to talk about the neighborhood without mentioning the drastic changes in the social fabric that have been made over the years. In San Salvario, the proximity with the Porta Nuova station and with the Fiat Pole were essential to entice people from the southern of Italy and foreigners to move to this area. After that, the area began to be considered a receptacle for crime and degradation. It was included in a redevelopment plan for some degraded areas of the city. As for Quadrilatero Romano, it is close to the historic market of Porta Palazzo, that is one of the largest markets in Italy and famous for its ethnic heterogeneity. Following the widespread awareness of the degradation present also in the Quadrilatero Romano area, a development process formally began in the 90s. In recent years, both the areas have become important centers for touring nightlife. But what distinguishes more the transformation of the two districts is the fact that the one of the Quadrilatero was developed with the classic method, changing the type of residents and users, starting from a changement in the building fabric and subsequently in the services and commercial activities, while the one of San Salvario was aimed at creating social cohesion and awareness of the citizens. So, as also Bellini and Ravazzi referred, the Quadrilatero is based on a pro-growth approach, while San Salvario on a pro-welfare one.
Regarding the methodological part, we start with a quantitative analysis. In fact, we analyze the composition of population and the building fabric from its 2011. We analyze also and compared some activity present in the area from 1977 to 2016 with these two schemes. The second part of the methodology regards open and the questionnaire. And at the beginning of the research, our main questions are three. First of all, we asked ourselves if the European policy adopted in the two districts had made them safer or if it was just an appearance. The second one is what do population of Turin think about this neighbor? And the last one is how did those who live there for some time now experience these changes? For our research, it is important to understand the perception of the people, both insider and outsider for each area. In fact, we decided to interrogate all the citizens of all ages, leaving out association and institutional figures. The questionnaire is structured into parts. The first one, equal for each person. It is aimed to understand if the person is insider or outsider, and what kind of occupation of job does, and how long he is lived or has been in the neighborhood. The second part is aimed to understand how insider or outsider see and experience the neighbor. This is a fluid and free conversation, but with a common script in order to not to deviate much from the main theme of the investigation. So the relationship between the redevelopment and safety, and in particular the change in the perception of the safety.
By addressing the interviews, it can emerge that, first of all, how the phenomena of change are perceived for each of the two neighborhoods, as well as the difference in the physical and cultural perception of the two neighborhoods. The outcome that we expect is also the difference between day and night perception for both districts, but we will only be able to say something more when we will actually address the interview. Since the context and the consequent approaches in which these processes took place were different, the effects of gentrification are similar but differ in many aspects. For example, In the case of San Salvario, partially still remain some of the problems that had been tried to solve. And furthermore, the area is constantly changing, and the huge presence of the students can suggest a phenomenon of studentification. It could be finally argued that while gentrification in the Quadrilatero is now consolidated, that of San Salvario is still evolving. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you.